Hello, I am Ben Kajawa. I'm the lead interviewer.
I'm Nick Hansen, I'm the second year interviewer, and Teddy Grassman is our videographer.
Today it is December 12th, 2019 at 7:15 p.m. and we are here with Mr. John McGlocklin. All right, so you were born in Franklin, Indiana, which is a pretty small town, right? So what were some of like your earliest memories, like sports related? Was that the huge part of like your early life?
Well, Franklin, Indiana is 20 miles south of Indianapolis, so it's a little south of Central in the state of Indiana. Indiana's a long state. You guys know that. And so it's kind of southern influence there. And when I grew up, you know, I was born in 1943, so when I started having memory, early 50s, country music with the old ones like Hank Williams Sr. and all the Patty Klein and all these, those were influences on me until Elvis hit the scene and then rock and roll hit. But growing up in a small town like that, I think was a tremendous blessing for me. And then on top of that, I was a basketball player from third, fourth grade on. We didn't have organized sports. I played in my backyard. I played on my hoop outside when I'd hang lights out the window. And but it was just what I was good at naturally early. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. It's just what I did. But as time went on, 7th, 8th grade freshman, I decided that was what I wanted to be. But in a small town, in a small school of 118 in my class, I played football, track, baseball, and basketball. And then, fortunately, as years went on, and I look back and I thought, thank God very much that I wasn't injured in football and couldn't play basketball, because that's where all my scholarships were coming from. My mom and my dad was a milkman and then later a taxi cab driver in this small town, and my mom and dad drove a cab. So there was no money, but we didn't know it. We didn't know we didn't have things. So for me to earn a college scholarship and being the first McGlocklin to go to college and graduate was a big deal. But growing up in that environment nurtured the gift that I had, being a basketball player. And I learned early on to be an athlete, I had to be a student too. So I was a very serious student. I tried hard. I'm not sure I was very bright, but I learned. I couldn't have made it at Marquette High, I don't think. But I learned, and I learned as time went on that speaking was my desire. And so I would take all the speech courses, and as I did it in high school and in college at Indiana. But I really feel growing up in a small town was a great value to me.
On that part of you loving like public speaking, you talked about Bob Richards. Was he a big idol for you?
Well, it's interesting. He was the first athlete on a Wheaties box, and he was a pole vault champion back in the Olympics back, I don't know, early 50s. Something. And I heard him speak at the Final Four tournament in Indianapolis. And in Indiana, there was one class system. And so when you won the Indiana State Basketball Championship, it was a big deal. It was something people remembered. Now you say, well, who won Class C? Nobody knows. So I heard him speak, and I was a freshman. Totally motivated me. Motivated me as an athlete and as a speaker. And so I went that route because of him. But athletics is something that was just always there in me. My brother, who's 6 years older, was a good athlete. My father was, but not college athletes. And it was the environment in Indiana in basketball. 4 years on the varsity, I never played in a gym at home or on the road that wasn't sold out. And the world's largest high school gym is in Newcastle, Indiana. It seats 9,500 people. My wife's high school seated about 4,500. So basketball was a tremendous influence for me.
It's like football in Texas there.
Exactly.
It's a lifestyle for a lot of people.
It is. It was my life. Yeah. But you know what's interesting then versus today, I did play the other sports. And I think that was of value. But in the summer, in the off season when you improved, that's when I played every day in my backyard.
Did both of your parents worked in a cab business? Did that give you like a lot of free time at home? Were they driving a lot?
Well, yes, but I was on my own a lot too, because they worked so hard. And even though they had very little, my dad never asked me to work in high school. He said, "You play basketball," because he wanted me to go to college and be the first to go to college, play basketball, graduate, and get a degree. We didn't think about professional basketball then because it wasn't the lure that it is today. It wasn't the money. There were only 9 NBA teams. It was very difficult to make it. The odds were so against you. So that wasn't my goal. My goal was just to be a good student, get a college degree, and be the best basketball player that I felt Indiana had ever seen. Well, I'm not that, but I was up there.
You're pretty close.
Larry Bird was pretty good.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
So kind of moving on into your college life, what kind of a shift going from small town to, Indiana, pretty big college?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I was heavily recruited, 80, 100 schools. And a lot of these coaches that we allowed that came in and they would come and visit me and try to recruit me and be in our home and ask questions, And just 10 miles away from me, Tom and Dick Van Arsdale, who were Mr. Basketballs in Indiana, the same year, we were seniors the same year, they were heavily recruited so people could come through and catch me and catch them at the same time for recruiting. Ironically, all 3 of us went to Indiana. They're my best friends today, along with Sal Bando. Yeah. And we played at Indiana together and roomed in Indiana together in a fraternity house. And they were drafted, played 12 years in the NBA, and I played 11. So we've remained friends. But growing up there and having these colleges come in and try to get me to come to their school and offer things, even back then, it was a tremendous experience because no one in my family had ever gone through it.
Yeah, that's got to be really important for you to be the first one in your family to graduate. What was your major?
Well, I started out as a business major and ended up with an education major and a business minor. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, I'll coach and teach. Mm-hmm. Well, after I did my student teaching, I realized that this isn't for me. And when I came out of college, I was drafted by the NBA, but I also looked at going into business, into sales, like Balfour and Jostens, who sell rings like these. Yeah. And I interviewed with them. But I decided to go to the Cincinnati Royals, who had drafted me. And remember, I just said there were 9 teams, there were 10 players on a team. There were 90 pro players in the world. So the odds of making it were ridiculous. Yeah. They drafted 7 big guards and they wanted 1. And God watched over me, I made it. They paid me $10,000 and I was offered $10,000 to coach and teach in a high school in Indiana. Now think about that. $10,000 to play in the NBA. Today it's $20 million. Yeah. And I got the same amount of an offer to coach and teach in a high school. So I went to the NBA, obviously.
Was there any school that you were almost thinking about picking over Indiana?
Well, I took some visits. The problem is I was running track. I was a really good shot putter, and I had all the county and conference records. Now, when it got to the big time and those 260-pound guys came up against me, I was done. Yeah. But so legally, you couldn't take a paid visit. You had to pay for your own visit. So, I went to Kentucky. I went to Purdue. I went to a few schools. But, and there were a lot of schools I thought about, and there were some that really came at me hard. But I ended up, at the end of the day, I knew I was going to Indiana. And Coach Branch McCracken was the coach there then. And he was a 6'5", 230-pound, white-headed man who was well-known throughout the state, won 3 NCAA championships. When he came to see me as a freshman and a sophomore in high school, I was probably had then. I just didn't know it when we heard that he was in town and at my game. So at the end of the day, I was going to Indiana. And so it was pretty much a sure thing. Plus, my parents could watch me play. They were 50 miles away, so they could come and watch me.
That's big for you, being close to family.
Yep.
Nice. So in 1966, you joined the reserves. Like, how was it to, be in, kind of post-college? Was it post-college for you?
Yeah, I was in the pros already, and I was in Cincinnati. And you have to remember, guys, this was during the Vietnam War, and it was starting to really ramp up. So my draft board, my aunt was on the draft board in my hometown, and she said I was going to get drafted into the NBA. Into Army, not the NBA. I was already in the NBA. So the Cincinnati Royals helped me get into a Army Reserve unit. So I was in the reserve unit for 2 years in Cincinnati, 1 year in San Diego, and that's 3. And then you have to do 6 years. And the remaining years, I was in Army Reserve units here, which means you have to serve for 6 years. You got to go to 2-week summer camp every summer, and you had to go to a weekend meeting every month. And here I'm playing pro ball. Mm-hmm. So my reserve unit was kind. They let me miss some of the weekends, but I had to make them up during the week. So I'd go to practice in the morning and then to the reserves in the afternoon to make it up. It was a tough time. It was a scary time because they were calling up units to go to Vietnam. And so every day I'd get up and read the paper and hoping that I hadn't been called up.
Yeah, that's gotta be.
Yeah, it's you guys can imagine if they had the draft and your name was in it.
Yeah. We've had a couple teachers who were, their brothers were drafted.
They went. And you can have a life plan, but they take you, a different direction. Yeah.
So we're going to finally kind of get onto your Milwaukee history.
Yeah, okay.
So you joined Milwaukee in 1968.
Right.
Year after the Milwaukee riot, were you a little scared about coming into a city that just faced, like a city shutting down for a couple weeks?
Concerned. Yeah. Not scared, but concerned. So we were in San Diego playing for the San Diego Rockets the year before. So that was my 3rd year. We came here my 4th year in the NBA. And I asked to be put up in expansion. I wanted to be picked by Milwaukee. It was Milwaukee and Phoenix were the 2 expansion teams. I wanted to come here. Why? Midwest, back close to home. And the general manager here who they had hired had been the coach at UW, who I played against. My last college game was at UW in the old field house. I'd never been to Milwaukee. I'd been to Madison. Didn't know what Milwaukee was, anything about it. But my wife and I, who was pregnant with our first child, we drive San Diego to Milwaukee in June. We were like, we took about 7 days.
I made that drive last summer with my sister.
It's an entertaining drive if you take time, but she's pregnant.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what we were coming into because the riots had occurred with Father Grappi and the confrontation on the bridge, and so we didn't know. And as we came into town, it was a beautiful summer day in June, and we're driving in, we put the windows down, and down around Miller Park today, there was this odor, and we're like, what? Where are we? Found out later it was hops, because Miller, Pabst, and Schlitz were all producing at that time in this city.
Yeah.
So that's what we smelled.
Yeah.
And we found out about that later. So we came into town, and then I had to go to training camp and fight for a job. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you were, coming into Milwaukee, you'd already been to a whole bunch of other cities. What was like some first impressions of Milwaukee compared to like some other cities at the time?
Well, again, we didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
One, Lake Michigan and going to the lakefront, which then isn't what it is today, but it was cool. We stayed overnight one night, picked up some tape and things, and we were going to drive to Indiana for a few days to visit family, my wife's family and mine. So I had to pick up some tape and things like that for my ankles. So then we stopped somewhere on the south side, had no idea where we were. So here's my impression. We had our first fish fry.
Oh.
I never ate fish in my life till I came here. My wife had, but only with what her parents would catch when they would go on places. So we stopped and had our first fish fry. To this day, we don't know where we stopped. We wish we knew, but it's a staple for us still in our lives and our family.
The Big Fish Friday
So,
night.
so that was my impression. But it was a different city in 1968.
Yeah.
And we found out it was still a very segregated city, not just in terms of black and white, but in terms of the Germans, the Poles, the Irish, the Catholics, the Protestants, I mean, where everybody lived, and we had never experienced that. This is the first time in my life I was asked, is McGlocklin Irish or Scotch?
Yeah.
And I wasn't really sure how to answer it. Because where I grew up, you never had that type. You didn't have the different ethnic groups. In my small town, we had Baptists, Methodists, and Presbyterian. Didn't have Catholics, didn't have Jews, didn't have any. Small towns back in the 40s and 50s. So Milwaukee kind of opened us up to the world a little bit in terms of exposure to other types of backgrounds.
Yeah, it's a very eclectic city with
It
all
is.
the different, whether it be, all the, then the Polish living on the south side and how, everything was separated by that aqueduct and, the valley
It's
was
true.
kind of that great wall in the middle.
It was always clean in those areas too.
Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
You're kind of like this, you're an icon in Milwaukee, You're a pretty big name. Was there any, kind of unique moments that you had, just being in Milwaukee, people recognizing you? Would you get, asked for autographs, but were there any really cool moments that you had with fans, I guess?
Many. First of all, back then, people didn't recognize me back then because the Milwaukee Bucks were brand new, and people were thinking this expansion team and what is it? And I think our first game against the Chicago Bulls, we had 6,000 people in the arena, which today is of course where UWM plays and the Admirals. It was a great place to play because people could get close to us. It took a little while for people to find out who we were, but it happened certainly rapidly in 1971 when we got 71 when we got Kareem, and then Oscar, and then we win it. That took everything like this. We flew back in from Baltimore where we won the championship, and they estimate there were 10 to 15,000 people at the airport. It took 4 police officers to get my wife and I in our car at the airport. And then I started to drive home, and I had 15 cars at least following me. Well, and I'm like, well, I don't want to go show these people where I live, And so we lost them. But that really started the beginning when we got Kareem the year before and then that year. And since then, my entire life here, it's pretty hard for me to go out and not be recognized every day. And I think my TV background had a lot to do with that because I did Bucks television for 43 years. And then being on TV things, and we used to have a telethon for the MACC Fund that I hosted. And so I've had so much notoriety, but I'm stopped often, almost daily, with kind comments from, oh, you're Johnny Mac, you're John McGlocklin, to my father used to take me to games and he's no longer here, and seeing you makes me very emotional. I've had people say things like that to me. It's pretty moving. I've had a lot of people stop me on the MACC Fund, and I've had cancer moms literally grab me. One time in particular in a McDonald's, spun me around, and I was like defensive, it's a young woman, tears running down her cheek, thanking me for the MACC Fund. Those moments, guys, are, you can see, those moments are moving. They're inspirational. They're motivating to me because I want to go out and beat cancer for these kids. But when that happens, you're humbled. So I have a lot of great stories like that. One time, a friend of mine gave me a J Mac license plate, and I was still playing. See it? I kept it on 1 week. I got it off, and we got a regular plate. People were coming, honking at me on the freeway, yelling at me. They'd see that plate, and then they'd come up on me, and so I kind of got rid of it just because I didn't want to hide, but I didn't want that much attention.
Mm-hmm. You said you when playing in the Mecca, you played on Robert Indiana's floor, hanging up over there.
Yeah, but that was at the tail end of mine.
Yeah.
I really played on the old arena floor.
Blue circle in the
Yep.
middle.
Yeah.
When you played on the Robert Indiana floor, was it definitely an advantage?
It's fun. No, I don't think so. I think in the beginning, everybody thought it might bother players. As it turned out, they liked playing on it. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll give you an example of the opposite. The ABA had the red, white, and blue ball. Mm-hmm. Well, the year we won the championship, we played 15 preseason games the next year. Today, they play 4.
Yeah.
We played 5 or 6 ABA teams. We would play one half NBA rules, second half ABA rules. When we had to play with that ball, I hated it. It bothered me. So there can be distracting things. Like I played the first pro game I ever played in the Astrodome, which was the first dome in the country. Okay? And it was when Kareem was with us. We played the Houston, who Elvin Hayes played for, and they'd faced each other in college. Well, they didn't set it up right, so the nearest floor was north seat was 50 yards away. So you'd pull up for a jump shot out in the middle of this dome, and it was like being out in the field, like you want to test the air, and guys were shooting air balls, because it was so funny. The Robert Indiana floor didn't bother people. Most of the guys liked it.
Do you think it's kind of a Milwaukee icon that kind of needs
No
to be
question.
brought back? Do you think they should?
I don't think they ever will.
Yeah.
Because it's a new day, new owners. We've got different floors. I really like our floors. Have you seen our throwback floor with the deers on it? Yeah. I really like that one. And the black uniforms. Mm-hmm. So, but all that's about money too.
Yeah.
They sell those.
Yeah.
So when they have all these different uniforms, people want to buy them, especially when it says Giannis. Can you guys say it?
Antetokounmpo.
What's the last name?
Antetokounmpo.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. It took me about 2 weeks before I could say it on the air.
What were you calling him?
I just call him Giannis.
Okay.
I don't like Greek Freak. I never called him that. He likes it. I don't. I just never called him that on the air.
Call him a freak, Yeah.
He's a remarkable. People want me to compare him. I can't compare him to anybody. Now, there have been other guys that are as great or greater players, but not with almost 7 feet with the length, the ability to handle the ball and go to the basket. I mean, Kareem had the length, but he was an inside player. Connie Hawkins had all this, but he was smaller and didn't have the dynamic athleticism that this kid has. It's amazing.
He is pretty.
And we get to watch it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I know it.
With sports and how they're able to connect to community, do you feel like the Bucks, the Brewers, do you feel like sports in Milwaukee are bringing together this very segregated city, or do you I feel like a lot of times with sports there's also a lot of stereotypes that are instilled. Do you feel like Milwaukee sports are helping bring us together, or do you think they may be instilling more stereotypes? I
think they absolutely bring you together. And there's many reasons for that, but people here love their sports. They love their Packers, and the Brewers and the Bucks are good. And you realize the 3 stars on those teams, what we have in Wisconsin, a quarterback, Yelich, and Giannis. These guys are all MVPs.
Yeah.
They're for our teams. The Brewers, and I think they've done a great job. I think the Brewers of the Robin Yount, Molitor, Gorman Thomas era when they went to the World Series, those guys all I knew quite well. Mm-hmm. And they would come out and do all kinds of MACC Fund things. I think all that brings us together. I could, when I played in still, I can go into the African American community. They will recognize me, and I'm welcomed like that. I ran into a young man today in a place, Johnny Mack. He's Afro-American. It breaks down those barriers. You know what I mean? It didn't matter. I don't see a black guy and a white guy, and I think it's tremendous that way. Yeah. Sports.
I was able to just bring a community together. I guess the kind of height of your career was the 1971 championship. Mm-hmm. You talked about how people were swarming you. Was that because I feel like when you hear about the Braves winning their championship, that was humongous. It was Bushville versus big city. Do you feel like it was also kind of like an underdog story, a little bit with Milwaukee being a small town?
Not then. we're very aware of the Midwestern thing, and that's one reason I wanted to come here. I always want Midwestern teams to win, always do. But then we were so good, and we had two of the greatest players ever, two of the top 10 players ever, Oscar and Kareem. We were no underdog. Yeah. And the city, of course, because we couldn't draw 18,000 in our building, we could draw 11 in the old arena. But no, we didn't feel that way at all. And the way the fans would respond to us was great. Now I'm going to tell you a pet peeve I have, and it really hit me when the Brewers went to the World Series and lost to St. Louis. They had a parade for them and all these things. They never did anything for us. The city did nothing for us. No parade. The state did nothing for us. We had our own private party with the team. And to this day, I don't appreciate that. And if we win one, maybe they'll bring back our championship team and we'll all celebrate together. That'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool. So after your basketball career got wrapped up, those 11 years, you started the MACC Fund. Could you just kind of, what was like your initial thoughts? Like why would you, start something like this?
Well, Eddie Doucette was our announcer from the beginning, and he was the first guy I met in Milwaukee and the first Milwaukee Buck employee I met. He and his wife and my wife were best friends, even to this day. And they had a son who was 2.5 years old, and he had been diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia just prior to my retirement night. So I was told, well, John, you need to pick a charity that we can identify. Well, I'd done a number of other charities, Easter Seal, Prevention of Blindness, and other things. But Eddie and I got together and said, let's do something for childhood cancer. So we went to the Bucks and said, this is what we want to do. And they said, whatever you want. Here's our lawyer. Here's our marketing firm. Here's us, whatever you want. So we announced it on my retirement night, and we started this organization. And then Eddie and I would go on radio and TV every night during a Bucks game, and we would mention the MACC Fund. Hey, and then people started calling me. Hey, Johnny Mac, we want to learn more. Would you come to this? Would you do this? Would you do that? And I would go, and I'd tell them, and sometimes they'd pass the hat, maybe at a Lions Club meeting or a fraternity in Madison. There's stories like that. And they'd pass the hat, and I'd leave with dimes and nickels and dollars stuck in my pockets. Take it to the MACC Fund. And we kept talking, and it kept growing. And the Bucks gave us a preseason game, which we still have through Senator Cole also, continued it. And this ownership group has continued it. We have a preseason game called the MACC Fund game, the annual. It's usually in October. And they give us the proceeds. So that first year we raised $35,000. And I just kept going out and going out and going out. So I'm going to fast forward to today. Just 2 days ago was our 43rd anniversary, December 10th, of the formal announcement. Now remember I said we raised $43,000. We've now given to research $65 million.
That's crazy. That is crazy.
Now here's the payoff. Back then, only 20% of kids that got any form of cancer survived. 80% died. Your Marquette guys, you can understand 80 and 20. Today we reverse those numbers. They reversed because of research. So it's been significant. And people of Wisconsin should be very proud of the MACC Fund because they've done this through all these events we do and donations, and we have about 80 events a year. It grew over time. And because it's research, it helps people all over the world. Mm-hmm. So people here should be proud.
Honestly, that's probably one.
Yep.
Out of all in my opinion, of all the things you've done, I think that's probably the greatest.
No question. And I will tell you guys this. I've often wondered, okay, how did I get from the dirt court in my backyard to the NBA and then to Milwaukee and a championship team and an all-star team and radio and TV, and we had businesses, Sal Bando and I. How did all that happen? I'm not a real bright guy. I'm a good communicator. And then I've realized for years, there's one reason, and you guys that have faith. God determined I was going to do this and use the athletic part to build the MACC Fund part. I believe that. I believe God has plans for our lives. I believe He lets us live our lives and make decisions, sometimes wrong. I believe that's how I got there. How did I get there? There were 9 teams. How did I make it? So when people come up to me today and want to debate with me, usually younger people, say, could you play today? You know, they're more athletic than you were. I go, wait a minute. I played when there were 90 players. I shot 50% from the field. Are you kidding? Don't come up to me with that when there's 500 jobs now versus 90. And if I pick the 15 greatest players of all time in the NBA, I would say 10 to 12 of them come from the 60s to the 80s. Well, think about it. Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson. Now, would I put LeBron on there? Yeah. Would I put Kobe on there? I don't know. Maybe.
Wow.
Name some others, but probably Kobe.
Yeah.
But how many? Giannis is maybe going to get on there. Maybe some other guys. But I'm telling you, who was greater than those guys I just named? Yeah. Chamberlain averaged 50 points and 28 rebounds a game, and played against Bill Russell 10 times a year. Bill Russell, greatest defensive player that's ever played. So when people want to debate with me, say things like that, I just go, never mind. They don't know what they're talking about. So these talk show hosts, and they have all this knowledge, they don't know about that era of people. Give me the three-point line. So if I played today and did just what I did, I'd make $30 million a year. Because I could stroke it, okay? I made average $40,000 a year.
I think you could too.
Yeah. So I just kind of got off right there.
So going back to your
Mr. Bando would make about $25,000-$30,000 a year too today. He was a great player.
With like Mr. Bando, what other than the MACC Fund, what other business ventures did you have like in Milwaukee?
Well, yeah. So what most people don't know is I had a business world. I was kind of like an iceberg. They saw the player, they saw the announcing, and then later the MACC Fund up here. But under here I went to work in my businesses every day for 25 years in a suit and tie. And so we built this company. It went public in 87. And we had it for about 20 or 25 years. And then just time ran out on it. Things changed and the model changed. And then I ran for 10 years a company that we owned that was a manufacturing awards company. It would do decals and awards product like things you see here, and I ran that for 10 years, and then got out of there, and then I spent more time with the MACC Fund, and some stuff still with the Bucks. But I stopped announcing basically last year. I did 3 games, but I was just ready to stop. Yeah. And I'd traveled for almost 50 years. I couldn't travel anymore.
Yeah. I understand that.
And 33 of my years we traveled commercial, not charters like they do today.
Yeah.
And think of this, guys, when we won the championship and I did my announcing, we were in the Western Conference. Milwaukee in the Western Conference.
That's kind of weird.
Flying commercial. So I went through Chicago or Denver or Minneapolis every trip, flying coach, until eventually the league got it we could fly first class. So think of Kareem.
How do those guys fit in the plane?
Kareem would always get the bulkhead, and his legs would go straight out into the galley. And he'd take a blanket and put it over his head to sleep, and then everybody leave him alone. Not us, people. And that's the only way. And think about it, they didn't have king-size beds in hotels. Kareem would have to put a chair at the end of his bed. Dick Cunningham was 6'10". He had to put a chair at the end of his bed. In a lot of those rooms, the shower hit me here. Well, heck, that means it hit Kareem in his belly button. So it was a tougher era. But we didn't know any different. So therefore, if you'd had these guys today do all that, they'd implode.
Yeah, so like when you were, traveling to all these different cities, you kind of went from, you probably played New York a couple of times, how does like...
I think I've counted, I've been to New York probably 100 times as an NBA announcer or player.
That's kind of crazy. I've been to New York a couple times.
It's a great place to go. Not stay, but go.
Go, yeah, definitely. I have family lives out there. But how do you think, these bigger cities compared to a city like Milwaukee, whether it be like the people or like the culture?
Yeah. Well, they have more to offer in terms of, especially if it's LA or New York, Chicago. But it depends on the person. My wife and I would have disappeared in those cities. Couldn't live in them. I always feared I'd be traded to the East Coast, to a New York or Philly or Boston would have been okay, and I never was. So that's a blessing. But I think it depends on what you like. I know a lot of Midwesterners that live in Manhattan and love it. Depends on the person, not for us.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that as well.
I mean, I need space, and there you never have
Be able to
space.
look out somewhere, and rest your eye.
Or get in a car and drive and be able to see off into the distance. Or eat without someone right here you don't know.
Yeah, I feel that. Don't worry.
Yeah.
So, sorry, just got.
You're not going to run out of tape, are you?
No, don't worry. So when you're announcing games, how is it different, being an announcer than being on the court?
Well, let me back up. When I retired, I went into the front office and I was going to be the next general manager. I was assistant general manager to Wayne Embry, who was the first African-American general manager in all sports. And I played with him for 3 years in the NBA, actually. So I knew him well. But then I started doing radio and TV with my buddy Eddie Doucette. And we didn't do a lot of television early. 10 games, then 12, then 15, then 18, then 24, now 82, as cable grew. But remember, I love speaking, motivational. So this was a natural for me. And Eddie wanted me to do it, the Bucks wanted me to do it, and WTMJ wanted me to do it. So I did it, and it was natural. I learned early on. Eddie helped me some, learned some things, but I was a color analyst, not a play-by-play guy. And I think I was one of the first ex-players to be a full-time color analyst for their team. It didn't happen as much like today. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
And it saved my life, I think, because I played 11 years. I wanted to play one more. The Bucks wanted me to retire and move into the front office. So it emotionally helped me make it. I was still with the team. I was still doing games. I was still associated with the Milwaukee Bucks. And it saved me because just to stop playing after you've done it your entire life, it's hard on a lot of guys. But by being the announcer, I was still.
It was a transition.
I was still there.
And do you think that was kind of like a blessing to have, because then you could go into like your business venture?
Total blessing. And then I told our owner I didn't want to be the next GM and that I wanted to look for a business. And that's what I started doing, and Sal Bando and I became friends through the MACC Fund. He would go on some MACC Fund things with me. He was still playing for the Brewers, and we became friends. We had a Christian lock together, and we had the same morality and faith, and we connected. And I told him, I said, well, I'm looking for a business. He said, I want to do it with you. He'd work for a bank in California, because in that days we all had to work in the off season, and we became connected. Long story as to how this company came about, but we started this company with other people, and spent almost 20 to 25 years together in that business. And he was he was assistant general manager for the Brewers and became full-time general manager, and then had to leave our business.
So you talked about Milwaukee having the first African-American general manager. This is not something I knew. I think this is, kind of influential for a city that's called the most segregated city in America.
Right.
To have, such a, trend-setting, person to be their first general manager.
Well, that was our first owners, and there was a group, but the primary guy, his name was Wesley Pavlon, and he was out of Chicago, but he lived in Milwaukee and had career academy and had businesses. Was a brilliant man, but really different. He would work nights and sleep days, and he was really a different guy. but because of that group, they hired Wayne Embry. And Wayne played on our first team here, our first year. Then he retired. He went back to Boston, where he had been living. And the Bucks, he was working for the park system. And the Bucks said, well, they went and got him. And he ended up as the first Afro-American in all sports as a general manager. And to this day, he's still involved in the NBA. He's does some consulting for the Toronto Raptors.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I think that's something I just...
It's a great story, isn't it?
Yeah. And, like, were people upset that they had an African-American?
No, I never heard any pushback.
Wow.
None.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Now, he might have felt it, and maybe some people would make comments that I wouldn't have been aware of, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, one other thing that I did not know about you is you have 3 Emmy Awards. Would you like to expand on that? Because I don't think I've ever heard, say, you know, Johnny Mac, you know,
I know.
3 Emmys, you know.
I know. Well, they started putting it in the press book. That's not individual, but it's Paschke, me, and our Bucks team, the director and the producer, and this the way this works. There's regions. Well, we're in the Chicago region, so it's still a big deal, and it's something I'm really proud of.
So awesome.
And what's interesting is people have had me bring awards to things and stuff. The things they're most interested in are the ring, and the Emmys. Those are the 2 things, and then they're most interested in my Hall of Fame rings, and then they start to go down the chain. But it's the ring and the Emmys that people go, oh man, let me see those, because everybody kind of knows about an Emmy, you know. And when I say I've got 3, which my wife is upset, I got 4 granddaughters. She says I got to win one more so I can give one to each one. I said, well, you don't just go win it, you know. But they're cool. They're cool.
That's definitely not a lot of people can have.
I know.
So, you talked about how you and Mr. Bando were able to connect through your faith life. Would you like to, you know, I remember in our pre-interview you also talked about an event happening in like 1977 or...
Oh, well, 79.
79, sorry.
No, it's okay.
It's okay if you don't want to talk
about it. No, I really talk about it, and I've given testimony many places. I'm very public with it because I think it's part of God's calling to do. So listen, so in my small town, I was not raised in the church. I went to a Baptist church and got baptized because my buddies did. Didn't know a lot, you know. Yeah. Didn't really go, wasn't a heart Christian or an everyday walking Christian, but I did get baptized. But didn't do anything with it. And my wife, we got married right out of college and been married all these years. And she wasn't a Christian. You know, she didn't go to church. Her parents didn't take her. So we didn't have it. We didn't have that background. Whereas here, a lot of our Catholic friends were raised, you know, going to church. Didn't make them Christians. Yeah. But they went to church. So a friend of mine after I moved here was a strong Christian, and he kind of kept coming after me. And I kept rejecting. You know, like, come to this thing, come to that thing. Christian things. And a series of things, I'll give you guys this, a series of things happened because I kept rejecting. You know, over a period of a couple of years. Became friends with Sal. Sal gave me a book called His Stubborn Love about a woman whose father was a pastor. She tried to kill herself 3 times. 3rd time she really found Christ. Sal gave me that book and his testimony. The next day, I lived out near Southridge at that time in Greendale. I had a little sports car, little Opel, cheap sports car. Remember, didn't make the money. So I went across from Southridge to a drugstore next to a Kohl's grocery store in those days. Okay? Before there were Kohl's department stores, it was grocery stores. I picked up some meds and I had parked the car 75 yards out by itself. Sports car. New car. No cars around me. I'm walking to the car and a woman's voice behind me says, "Excuse me." I turn around, she says, "Are you John McGlocklin?" I go, "I am." She says, "Are you a Christian?" Never been asked that in my life. She has 2 bags of groceries, had come out of Kohl's, 75 yards away. Okay? I went, well, I don't know, I guess. She says, well, my husband and I were praying for you. I said, thank you. I got in the car, I pulled out on 76th Street, I turned south to go to my home, and I looked back, didn't see her. Now, I'm just telling you the truth, what happened. Didn't see her. Groceries, 75 yards away, she wasn't there. The next day, I get on a plane and go to Denver. I'm doing a CBS game for Denver. I fly out after the game to Portland, Oregon to meet up with the Bucks to do a game in Portland with the Bucks, TV game, because I'm an announcer now. I get to the hotel at 2 a.m. It's a big hotel. I never take a bellhop, but I had so many bags I had to. I go up to my room, the bellhop comes behind me. I walk in, I turn the light on, I walk over and I hit power on the TV set. On comes Jack Van Imp of the Jack Van Imp Crusades, who was a little like Billy Graham, doing a crusade in Cleveland, Ohio, on TV. Now I'm standing there going, guy, bellhop, I left the door ajar, knocks, comes in. He was probably 25, puts it down, he says, excuse me, sir, what are you watching? I said, oh, this guy's talking about accepting Christ as your Savior in a Cleveland rally. He goes, are you a Christian? Second time I've been asked in my life, 2 days in a row. Are you a Christian? I go, well, nah, I guess, I don't know. He says, can I pray for you? And I go, no, man, no, thank you. I wasn't comfortable. I never prayed with anybody. So we stood there and talked for a moment, and then I went, will you pray for me? Put his hand on my shoulder. He prayed for me and he left. I got on my knees and I said, Jesus, I don't even know the prayer, but you're telling me something. And I'd read that book Sal gave me, From Denver to Portland. As it landed, I had finished it. And I was like, whoa, man. And then those things happened. And I had never read the Bible. We didn't go to church. I read the Bible every day since, other than when I was in the hospital. My wife became a Christian. We raised our kids that way. And right after that, I was asked to speak at the Billy Graham Crusade at County Stadium. And it was my first testimony. Now, I could speak, but they say, you got 3 minutes. So the Reverend Stuart Briscoe, Elmbrook Church, who's renowned internationally, I was meeting with him, and he said, John, you got to write it. I usually didn't write my speeches. Because he said, it's important, 3 minutes. Because you're on international stage. So I did. And I prayed for calm. And I got up there in front of all these people and the cameras, total calm. And then I'm going to tell you one other thing. That night, we're at Old County Stadium. We're upstairs in one of the old locker rooms. They check in with the Billy Graham people. Everybody was up there. They had me go over behind a curtain. There were 2 barber chairs. And they said, we'd like you to have pancake put on. You guys know. Yeah. And I say, no, I don't do that in the games. I don't wear pancake because I'm at a game. I don't want people seeing me. They say, no, please. The lights are so bright we need everybody because you'll be too shiny. Yeah. I get in the chair. They put me up, and in walks Billy Graham and sits in that chair. And I almost couldn't speak. It's the first time in my life I felt like an angel had entered my presence. Billy Graham. And he said, in his beautiful accent, John, so glad you're here tonight. And he sat down and we talked. And the thing that I remember the most was his humanity. He was talking about his children and his grandchildren and how concerned he was about the world and the future. That's what struck me. What a moment for me, you guys, right? God took me through all that. And so I know the moment that I became a Christian. And consequently, because it's kind of it's kind of a unique story. The testimonies that they wanted me, once the Christians found out, I mean, I was asked to go here, and I've done a lot of that. But because of the story that I think God gave me, people really listen. Because you almost think supernatural. Where did that woman go? And I'm not lying, you can't do that. But it's grabbed people. So I think God's used me that way.
Yeah. That was a lot.
It's pretty good, isn't it? Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Well, that's his.
After your, your speech at County Stadium, do you think that was the biggest, speech you've given?
Yeah, and again, it was 3 minutes, and it was my testimony. So try to do your testimony in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go through all that. I don't even know what I hope I kept it.
Somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I've never had a stage like that. I mean, there was 50,000 people there and millions because they rerun that, all over the world. And I had fraternity brothers and people write me over the years that saw it, And we need more of that today because there's too many people that...
People are losing faith.
It's bad.
Yeah. It is. Have you kept in touch with Billy Graham at all?
Well, he's passed now.
Yeah.
I didn't. Cliff Barrows, who was his right-hand man, who led all the singing, and as all of them come down, the song that they sing, that's Cliff Barrows. I had lunch with him. He gave me a Bible, signed it, and I stayed up on them through Stuart Briscoe. But they both have passed since. So, but they were wonderful moments for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So after that, did you kind of know you had to send your kids to, Christian schools, or at least Christian schools?
Well, we weren't Catholic, and we sent our son. I couldn't send my daughter, but we wanted him to have that. I mean, look, if Jesus Christ is the center of your faith, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether we're Catholic, Lutheran, Protestant.
Whatever.
To me, that doesn't matter. Just that Christ is there and you preach the Bible. But yes, we wanted our children to have that influence.
And that's
besides what they got at home.
Yeah. Definitely. And that's what led you to choosing Marquette for him.
No question. And we knew for him, he needed to be motivated and pushed. If he had gone to the public school where we lived, he probably would have gotten the same grades he got at Marquette. But if he'd have worked as hard as he did at Marquette, he would have gotten A's at that other school.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
And what we found out early on, it's you guys that motivate each other. It's not just the teachers or the priest, it's each other.
It's the brotherhood.
Absolutely. So we were thrilled, and he is too to this day, that he went there, yeah.
Would you think that's probably one of the best decisions you made for one of your kids?
We're big Marquette High people.
Yeah.
If they called today and asked my wife to be down there in an hour, she'd be down there.
That's awesome.
And you know how the moms, you guys know. And you'll learn someday when you're married, when your wife is involved and wants you to go, you go.
Yeah.
You got the men if you get the women. Marquette High understood that.
Yeah.
The priest understood that, who were never married. They knew, they knew how to do it. So, no, we think it's a great place. Yeah. If I had 5 boys, they would have all gone there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, my dad went there, and it's
well, that's the way it works.
Yeah, it's crazy the amount of community.
I hope you guys all feel it. Whether you're juniors, you probably do.
Yeah. You feel the brotherhood.
I mean, it's demanding. Definitely. I know. But you're going to go to college, and your first year in college, you're going to be like, we did this.
Yeah. I mean, like one of my buds, he goes to school down south, and he's like, this is the easiest
It's
thing.
easy.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to Harvard or Yale, maybe that's different, but yeah, it's truth.
Definitely prepares you.
Yep.
So kind of looking into the future, more presently, I guess, Milwaukee now, how do you think, overall, I know this is a big question, but how do you think it's like overall change? Do you think we're heading in the right direction as far as, as a city, as people, as a community? Do you think we've made improvements to when you first got here?
In terms of race relations or in general?
In general. I mean,
and, when Malcolm Brogdon played for us last year, Virginia graduate, 4-year,
smart guy.
4-year, came in as a 22-year-old, which we all did when I played, but mature, smart, probably wants to go into politics someday. And I read some articles in the journal that he felt like, the city's still very, very segregated and has big problems. And I think the Afro-American guys that get involved in the community, they can see that more than we can because we live, in a different world, in the white world. I'm told it still has a long way to go.
Yeah.
What has to happen for that to occur? I don't know. It's more than political. It has to come from the people. But that means both in all directions. Hispanic, Afro-American, white, yellow, everybody, as far as I'm concerned, has to try harder. But I will say this, if everybody had Christ at the center, it would happen.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's disappearing.
Yeah.
That's why the Christians that are Christians have to stand up and really put forth his message.
Yeah.
I think the city's come a long way in other areas. I mean, I think our outside owners, our billionaire owners, look what they've done downtown to the new building, to the whole area, the development of an area that was a blight, because it's only 2 blocks away from Hillside Boys Club and the Afro community area. And so it's brawling, I think that's done a lot to break down the lines and bring people into downtown Milwaukee more, besides what goes on at the lakefront all summer.
Yeah, I mean, Summerfest.
Best place in the country in the summer.
Do you think so?
I think all the festivals. I don't go to Summerfest. I don't go to any of them.
Yeah.
There's too many people for me.
No, I get that.
But I think they're tremendous. And I think people that I've talked to from around the country that come in for that, their socks are blown off. And then Harley has their anniversaries. And I think all of that goes a long way to help overall relations in this community.
Yeah, because, with all the different, it really is a melting pot of a city, but we just need to melt. We got all these different people here. We just need to be able to, be okay with each other's differences. And I feel like some people are, whether it be African American or white,
Yep.
people are still holding grudges, which really just need
But that's going to be humanity.
Yeah.
I mean, look at history. Look at the Roman Empire. I mean, that's being in a fallen world.
Yeah.
We're in a sinful world, and that's part of it. So you got to work at it. But I see big differences compared to when I came in between the Polish communities. It's not as rigid as to where everybody is anymore. There's more of a blending in the communities than I think there was in 1968.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming right off the tails of, civil rights movement.
That's right.
Now there's definitely got to be a lot of changes that have happened.
You guys know, you study that stuff?
Yeah.
You know who Father Grappi was?
Yeah, we know a bit about Father Grappi.
Okay.
He was national. That's crazy.
Yes, he was. Well, National was on this in 67, 68.
Some of the North is what we were called.
Yep,
Yeah.
I know. Not all good. You're
Not
right.
even
You're
that
right.
good. I mean,
You're
always
right.
had some high points, but definitely that was a low.
That's why the MACC funds of this community are important, because it shows you the good.
Yeah.
And it shows you the good about professional athletes too. Not everybody's out there getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And of course, those hit the headlines. Not the MACC fund, but the bad stuff. That's the stuff.
All right.
Are you finished?
I don't know. Are we? I think Nick might have some follow-ups.
You got some, Nicker?
Yeah.
All right, buddy.
When as your life becomes towards farther on, who do you plan to pass the MACC Fund on to?
It's a good question, buddy. He's the B guy, and he's asked a good question.
Sorry, I'm just laughing.
No, you have too. Good job, you guys. Okay, so I'm asked often, even within the MACC Fund, what about our succession planning? That's what you're talking about, succession. And it's a good question, and it's not a hard question for me because at my age, I don't have a lot more in the barrel. So what happens? We're not going to be able to replace me. Not that I'm that great. I don't mean it that way. But the combination of notoriety, what I was, and my commitment to it, you're not going to go out and find an athlete to do this and be me and love it that way. So what we've got to be is a great staff and a great board. And those are the two things we've been building and working on. And so that it can go past me. And in the early days, most people thought it was just, when I decided to quit, it was over. And that's why we did some things that we did. We pledged $4 million to the Medical College of Wisconsin for a building where our research goes on. So the people would look at that and go, oh, this isn't just Johnny Mac. Maybe it's going to be here longer. We've been here 43 years. We're going to be here until we beat cancer. So I think we have people in place to do that. It's just not going to be someone like me to do what I've done, because where are you going to get that? I mean, I'm trying to talk to Giannis about, give me a commitment of you're going to be our guy, but he's not going to do what I've done. There just aren't.
Yeah.
No one's going to do that. But they can help a little bit, like Aaron has for the MACC Fund. He's given us a lot of notoriety and money. Maybe there's moments, but we got to have a good staff and a good board. That's a good question.
And then, how in touch are you with your teammates that you played with on that championship team?
Well, first of all, let's start with this on the championship team. Our coaches passed away. Our number one forward off the bench has passed away. Bob Boozer and Larry Costello. The rest are alive. We only played 7 and 8 guys, and we didn't play, 9, 10, 11. So the last 4 guys on that team, most people don't know who they are because they never played. But I see Oscar periodically. He's in town with the Bucks. I talk to him periodically. I talk to Bobby Dandridge, who was starting forward. We call each other periodically. He works for the Washington Bullets in their alumni program and lives in Virginia. Greg Smith, who was the best athlete on the team, played forward at 6'5", lives in Portland, retired from a radio station. I talked to him. Dick Cunningham, the backup to Kareem, and he played 48 minutes a game, and he was 6'10", 265.
That's a big boy.
Big dude. He just called me a week ago, and we visit. And Kareem. Saw Kareem at a Bucks thing this summer. Sometimes I've run into him at things, and Kareem's a little bit more private, a little bit more difficult, but I've seen him come over when I'm doing a game before the game in different buildings and find me, and we go over and sit down and talk about our families. So we stay in some touch, and I would guess in a year, not this season, next, or the one after, will be the 50th anniversary of the championship. 71, so it'd be 21. I'm hoping they'll bring that team back.
You'll get your parade.
Especially if this team wins.
Yeah,
but remember, we're all getting older. We're going to start to lose more and more of them. And our trainer passed away, too, who we were all close with. All right.
One last thing. You said you were talking to Giannis just about the MACC Fund in general. Do you talk to anybody else on the current Bucks team about just like or playing in the NBA or any kind of just tips you give?
Yeah. Yes, I have, especially with Pat Connaughton, because he and I talk.
He's a businessman too.
He is. Yeah. He is. And good dude. Yeah. And sometimes he and I will talk when I'm down there. I get down there at 5 o'clock, and I'm out watching the guys, and we'll talk. A lot of the other guys I don't know, and I don't know if they all know who I am, because I don't do the games and I don't travel anymore. When I did the games and I traveled, I'm with them on the road and on the plane, then I'd be talking to guys, and they'd talk to me, and they'd ask me, some of the teams over the years, Johnny Mac, did you guys really fly commercial? Did you really take care of your own uniforms? Did you really get $8 a day meal money? And they get $119. Did you really not have nutritionists, massagers, 5 trainers? I said, yeah, we didn't have all that. But now that I'm not with them as much, I don't get that as much. Yeah.